To talk about my mage, first and foremost, I am running a Spellstorm mage, so I'm not choosing the other path, which is the, I want to say something with fire, whatever it is. But yeah, I'm running the Spellstorm mage, so I'm going to be using a lot of arcane abilities, ice abilities, and lightning abilities, and that's our main ability damage typings. But first off, I will show you my gear. Right now it's nothing special, it's nothing really to call home about, it's just basic stuff, but I am taking power and critical strike for my main mana seeker gear, so that's one on the right side if you guys are looking for it. I do have a frosted glyph. I was trying to figure out how these glyphs works, or how long they stay, or what the kind of damage was doing, so I'm running a frosted smithing glyph. So that's actually been pretty nice to do. It deals, whenever I'm dealing damage, there's a 25% chance to gain Frost Wrath for 20 seconds, which grants 1,000 power and causes my damage to apply Frost Strike to my target. This stacks 10 times, and when Frost Wrath ends, I get 800 damage of every frost damage per stack of Frost Strike. So this is good for like bossing and stuff like that. So that's what I've been using, but these are like specific amounts of time. They don't stay forever, so you do need to kind of save these for when you want to use them or whenever. But yeah, basically most of my gear is running through power and critical strike, and then recovery. The things I want to work out, or the things I want to use, are power and recovery. Eventually I'll grab some extra armor pen, so I'm able to really get to this cap and get through the damage, but for right now, this is just basic gear and stuff like that. I'll grab the rest later. I do have my Elemental Fire Talisman, which gives me increased increased damage while I have Chilling Presence. Since the majority of this build is focused around Chilling Presence and your Arcane Mastery, it's a little bit different than usual Wizard builds. So when I look at my powers, first and foremost, for Arcane Mastery basically increases your arcane damage dealt by 3% per stack, which stacks up to 5 times. So essentially it's 15% increased damage for your arcane abilities. And then Chill stacks up to 6 times, and using one of the passives that gives me 8% per stack, so 40% overall for my cold damage. Now, when let me cover my stats real quick. Stats, 27 in 15 Wiz, 22 Charisma. Charisma's critical chance is your basic damage. So those are what I'm running. As I get stats and stuff that'll focus around, I'll probably just go in more into int and a little bit more into charisma, because just int is your main damage source. It gives you the most of your damage. But heading over to powers, I just went through Magical Missile, Ray of Frost, Sling Strike. So I just went down, and I'll just talk about my main abilities. So I use Cognitive Ice. I use Oppressive Force. I use Arcane Presence maxed out, and then Chilling Presence maxed out. So these are the core of my build. So what Arcane Presence does is, for my Arcane Mastery, all of it increases the damage of your cold-based attacks by 34% of the buff value. When you get this up to rank 3, it gives you 100% increase, so it gives you the full 20%, it gives you the full 15% damage from Arcane Presence. Also increases my damage for my cold abilities. And then when you do the last one, which is rank 4, you get a 33% increase, which is 133% overall, which ends up putting you at about 20% increased damage from your Arcane Mastery being at max stacks. And then Chilling Presence, I get 2% increased in my cold damage per stack of chill. So then at rank 3, it gives you 6%, and in total it gives you 36% increased damage when you max out your stacks of chill, which again maxes out at 6. And then at the rank 4, it gives you 2% increased, which gives you 8%, so 40% overall increased damage. So these two in combination give you 60% increased damage for your cold abilities, and then also gives you just 20% increased damage for arcane. I use Chilling Cloud. This is my main kind of one. This is the one I spam a lot. And then I use Sudden Storm. I do use this is in my main build. And then Icy Terrain I used a little bit of leveling. I didn't particularly like it, so I don't totally use it. It's not really necessary, but Sudden Storm is definitely necessary to build. Storm Spiller is my other. This is what I use on my L2. You only have to cast this once every 20 seconds, so it's just a flat 5% increased damage. Yeah, I just cast it once every 20 seconds, or essentially once every 2 times I go through my rotation, I'll cast this. And I typically cast it, and this is the last thing I'll do while my other abilities are on cooldown. This is what I'll cast, and I'll just cast it once. You do need to fully cast it, you need to fully charge it, and then cast it so that you maintain that 5% buff. But otherwise, it's not really a big deal. It also refreshes your Arcane Mastery and Chill stacks, so it makes sure that you can keep up your stacks very occasionally, because if your stacks drop, your damage drops. This build is entirely focused on keeping up keeping up both of these stacks to amplify your damage. Brave Enfieldment I also run. What this does is it deals damage over time. It also increases the damage my target takes by 10% for 5 seconds. At max stacks of Arcane Mastery, which is 5, this goes up to 7.5 seconds as a base. And then as you work it up, it increases the duration, and the total duration ends up about 12 and a half seconds. Which is really nice because it gives you plenty of time to go through your rotation and get everything casted while maintaining the damage buff from this. Ice Knife is my other daily. What this is, I use this for single target. It just slams down, it gives me ice, and it adds 3 stacks of chill to my target overall. Storm Spell is typically the usual one for a lot of people. I don't really use Storm Spell, but I understand people use it, so I also took it in the builds. Ice Rays I was testing around with, don't totally like it. Shard of Avalanche I looked into, did not really like it. Maelstrom of Chaos I was checking out, and depending on what I'm doing, I typically run either this or Ice Knife. But Ice Knife does a little bit more damage and also gives me the chill stack, so I typically tend to stay with that. I did grab Eye of the Storm just to test it out, didn't particularly find it as useful. And then the last ability I use is Disintegrate. What Disintegrate does is deal damage to your target foe. If the target is below 280% of your weapon damage, they are killed instantly. And as you rank it up, the damage increases as well as the threshold. So at current, at rank 3, it currently is looking at, the threshold is 320%, and then maxed out, it's, is it 360? 120, what, 400 right now? Wait, 320, 360, 400, okay, yeah, so the last one is at 400 total percent. And this is basically our spammable. This really has a short cooldown, so this helps you really build up stacks really quickly, and you can spam it. It does really nice chunk damage. So this is our heavy hitter for us. So I'll go over the rotation in a second, but I'm going to talk about feats. For feats, I went 3 into critical strike chance, and then 2 into toughness. I then went all 5 into a counter cooldown. It's incredibly important for this build to be able to spam out my abilities. So cooldowns is really necessary for our build. The next thing I did is grab rank 3 into Blighted Powers, and then rank 2 into Arcane Embrace. This gives me 2% increased arcane damage and 3% increased damage, or 6% increased damage to targets affected by chill. I then went 2 into Learn Spellcaster and 3 into Prestidigitation. This gives you stat increase ratings overall to your entire party, so that's why I took this over just the 5% increase personally to intelligence. I feel like this overall is just better for party play, so I just maintained that instead. Jumping into stats, or jumping into our paragons, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So I took 5 into Bitter Cold. This gives us 5% more damage for 6 seconds after being affected by chill. This effect doesn't stack, but it does continuously proc pretty often. So it's pretty easy to dip and pretty easy to do. It's just basically a 5% increased overall damage for everything. And then the next thing I took is Tempest Mage. When your target's below 30% max hit points, you deal an additional 5% damage. This is actually kind of the last thing I'll take. Overall, I start with Malevolent Surge, so I get 5% more damage when I kill something. And this lasts 15 seconds. I do take Destructive Wizardry, so whenever I cast, this gives you the 5% increased damage overall for 20 seconds when you cast Storm Pillar, so that's why when I fully charge Storm Pillar, I get the increased damage there. I took Spell Twisting, so every time my encounter powers, apply Spell Twisting for 10 seconds, which stacks up to 3 times. When I cast an At Will, your stack of Spell Twisting are consumed, which reduces the cooldowns on my abilities. Again, I really want to be able to use my abilities as often as possible, so this is incredibly important to our builds. I took 5 into Elemental Reinforcements, so whenever I cast Fire, Arcane, Cold, or Lightning encounter powers, I gain 5% increased damage for each of them. So if I had a fire ability, I would be able to get the maximum 40% or the maximum 20% out of this. Since I don't, I take 15% increased damage over time, or just 15% flat increase to damage, because I'm using Arcane, Lightning, and Cold. So I get 5% for each of them. So once I use all 3 of them, then I end up with 15% total. I took Frozen Power. This gives me 5% bonus damage for every target my Chilling Cloud hits. It lasts for 20 seconds and stacks up to 3 times, so again, this can end up being 15% damage pretty easily, so it's just a really nice ability, and just from basically casting your At Will. Then do Elemental Empowerment. So what this does is it deals cold, while I'm dealing cold damage, I have 15% chance to apply Creeping Frost. Creeping Frost deals 85% of my weapon damage as cold damage every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. And then anytime I deal Arcane damage, I have a chance, the same 15% chance to apply Warp Magics. Warp Magics deals 15% of my weapon damage as Arcane damage every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. Warp Magic ignores half of the target's resistances. These effects do not stack. Now, when I first read these effects do not stack, I took this to mean that they do not work in Symphony together. However, that's not true. What it means when they say these effects do not stack, it means you cannot keep reapplying them while they are currently applied. So, while you do want to keep dealing damage, until the actual timer on them wears off, the actual 12 seconds, they won't reapply. However, they both can be working in Symphony, so you can have both Cheaping Frost and Warp Magics going at the same time, which is what I first misunderstood, which is why I was so hesitant to take this. However, after using it, it does work that way. And then the last thing we'll take is Assailing Force. So what Assailing Force does is, as I'm dealing damage to a foe, it grants me the chance to gain Assailant. When I have Assailant, my next encounter power deals 15% of the target's max HP as unresistible damage. My max, the maximum of this is 800 weapon damage. This will only affect one target when I'm using AoE. However, for bosses, killing this is really nice, and how you really want to use that is when you're going through rotation, you really want to make sure you can use it on your Disintegrate, because so when you use that, you want to make sure that it hits. So my rotation, typically, I always start with Ray of Enfeeblement, and then I go into my what's the name of that power? I go into Conduit of Ice, which is on my R1, which is a special ability for mage classes. This is Spell Mastery. I use this because it gives me stacking chilling effects, and it also increases the size of area effects, so this helps me with my AoE clear. But yeah, so what I do first is always to go Ray of Enfeeblement, Conduit of Ice, and then I go into Disintegrate, and then Lightning, to make sure my stacks are across, and then I charge up my Lightning Storm so that this does my extra damage overall, and that gives me my 10% increase, and then I go back to my rotation. As long as you're doing this, you're pretty much always going to have it up, so you can always just spam. And as you can see, I'm starting to get some nice damage overall just from everything. You only really want to cast your pillar whenever your buff wears off, which you can see over there is a little tornado under my name. You only want to cast this. You only really want to cast that whenever that's off. You don't really need to spam it all. Every other time, you're just gonna spam your Chilling Cloud and let that deal damage for you. and then you'll just keep going through that rotation, and it does nice damage for you. So that's everything overall with my build. I'll do a part 2 later to talk about the boons I choose when I look into boons and everything like that. But right now, this is everything I wanted to cover. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it helps you out. Please be free to leave any of your thoughts or anything below on the build. I'm fine with anything like that. So I'm gonna head over.